Hey everyone, this is Kalegi with Tim Moore reminding you that SportsSpeak is now powered by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the one-stop shop for tickets to sporting events, concerts, and so much more.
Use the promo code SportsSpeak at checkout for $20 off your first purchase.
SeatGeek, let there be live. Now, on to the show. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to episode 180 of SportsSpeak Live, powered by SeatGeek. I'm Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
It's the summertime, so use our promo code SportsSpeak, all caps, one word, and get $20 off your first online purchase, tickets to concerts, sporting events, and so much more. And we have a lot of sporting events to talk about today. Mets and Yankees just played in the Subway Series. The Grimace Mets absolutely demolished the Yankees, who are in free fall right now. We're going to talk about the Mets, talk about the Yankees, talk about Edwin Diaz's suspension. I got some things to say about that. The NBA draft just happened. LeBron is going to be playing with his son in an otherwise lackluster class. We'll discuss that. Mikal Bridges, the Nets finally have an identity, but they just traded Mikal Bridges to a rival. We're going to react to that. But let's start with Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final, and we've talked about it on the show before, Tim. The NHL, the NBA, and MLB are always competing to be that second sport to the NFL. The NHL has both the NBA and MLB beat in their postseason format and just how electric it is. A lot of that lends to the fact that it's hockey and every single score matters so much compared to the MLB and certainly the NBA, but it was a great Game 7, and Sergei Bobrovsky in goal had probably the best Game 7 performance I've seen in an American sport since maybe Justin Verlander pitching against the Yankees in 2017. I mean, this was just ridiculous how he was able to keep that going. Credit to the Florida Panthers defense too, but shout out to them. And this curse for these Canadian teams continues. Now 31 years without a Stanley Cup, and this felt like as setup of a team as possible. Connor McDavid, arguably the best player in the league. Leon Draisaitl, the best number 2 in the league. And still the Oilers can't get it done for north of the border. And the Florida Panthers get the win. And again, we're seeing these teams from the South randomly. The Lightning, the Panthers, the Vegas Golden Knights, not usually hockey cities, end up producing the best hockey teams over these last few years.
Indeed, it's been a big spectacle from what we've seen over the last few years. I mean, it's crazy to think it's only a few years ago, like how you mentioned the Lightning, how we felt that was the most dominant team in hockey history in what we've seen and what was a potential dynasty being built down there. But what I saw from the Panthers and specifically from Bobrovsky was just so incredible in that third period. I mean, I talked about it last episode on SportsSpeak, right? You talk about the capability of making big saves and good goaltending winning you championships. Ultimately, that won the Panthers the championship when it's all said and done. But what I loved at that end of that game, right? And I think, especially in the broadcast, they drew it up pretty well in terms of the story, right? McDavid had been on the ice 20 plus minutes. That unit had been going out. They're exhausted. Yet here they are finding opportunities to take shot after shot. And credit to the Panthers defense, even with their backs against the wall multiple times, rebound opportunities, it wasn't just good goaltender play that wins them the cup. They get blocked. They get bodies. The urgency, it's absolutely remarkable what we saw in that 7th game. And I think really, to be honest with you, Eddie, what won the Panthers the Stanley Cup had nothing to do with how they got a lead, how they got their lead and how they set themselves up. It really set themselves up for earlier in free skate that morning when you have your goaltender setting the tone of being the first person on the ice at 7 a.m. and setting that mentality of, hey, we've blown a 3-0 lead, but we care about this championship. We're not going to miss our opportunity again. And really, they were focused and determined. And I'm not saying for the record the Oilers weren't, but they set the tone early in the morning and they were all about business and they stood on business, needless to say, in Game 7. So congratulations to the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, absolutely. Good for them. We'll see where they go for here. Also crazy that Jason Tatum and Matt Tkachuk went to the same high school and they both win their first rings in the same year. Good for them. Same month, actually. So congratulations to the Florida Panthers, who get to hoist the Stanley Cup, have all kinds of fun with it for the next month.
Hey, by the way, too, a technical rarity, of course, Connor McDavid ends up winning MVP. So
which
that's the
is
other.
ridiculous. I'm sorry. MVP should not be going to someone who did not win the Stanley Cup. I'm all for the best player getting an award, but when your team can't come through, and frankly, Connor McDavid was non-existent in Game 7, I
Or
would not. Yeah,
last weekend
yeah.
didn't score a goal. They
Mhm.
they highlighted on the broadcast. It was 2+ games he hadn't scored a goal in game time, which is it's true. But to me, it's like, okay, I understand if you have different producers, right, in each game for Florida. But Bobrovsky in the net was lights out the entire series. How he isn't the MVP is mind numbing to me. I will say that because he single-handedly every single game, not just in the playoffs, but every single game in that Stanley Cup, even in loss and defeat, he gave that team a chance every time out to win. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Yeah, I'll disagree with you slightly, but I'll circle back to the same point. I know Bobrovsky gave up a bunch of goals in games 4 and 5 because the Oilers were able to come back. They scored, what, 8 goals over those 2 games? But just like Connor McDavid, he had 5 great games and 2 stinkers. The difference is McDavid's 2 stinkers came in the most important games, 1 and 2. Bobrovsky's team won the championship. So it makes no sense why McDavid got this award. I mean, good for him. He didn't really care. He didn't even come out to celebrate, because why are you going to celebrate winning an MVP trophy when your team just lost? Maybe in your career, your only chance to win a championship. So we'll see where it goes from here. Congratulations to the Florida Panthers on winning the Stanley Cup final. Now, the NBA, they finished their finals a week ago and immediately into the NBA draft. We knew this year probably the worst draft class since 2013. Zachary Rasache goes #1 overall. I'm not going to doubt the French players because besides Killian Hayes, they've all seemed to pan out these last few years. Frank Ntilikina also. Those are the 2 exceptions that were not very good. But dating back to Rudy Gobert, there have been some good French players that have gone in the draft. Even last year beyond Wemby, Koulibaly with the Wizards had a pretty good rookie year. Like, there are decent names. Now, Rasache doesn't really look like someone who'd be the #1 overall pick, but again, I mean, I don't know who else you'd pick out of that. Like, when you see Rob Dillingham, for example, and this is no knock on him, he could end up being a very good NBA player, but he goes 8th overall. This is someone who switched high schools 3 years through his career, went to play at Donda Academy, somewhere where we still don't know where that even is because they all have to sign an NDA. They're not allowed to say where Donda Academy even is. He plays for them, a brand new school, for a year, and then goes to Kentucky, does not even start at Kentucky. He's a 6th man on that team and gets cooked by Jack Golke with his crazy hair. He's 25 years old with his 10 3-pointers for Oakland in March Madness. That ends his career, and boom, he's a top 10 pick in this draft because there's not much there. And right after him goes Zach Edey, who, while he was a dominant college player, his speed is probably not going to lend very well to the NBA. He's 7'5". Maybe he'll work out, but I don't really know. So we'll see how that goes. But that's just an example of 2 top 10 picks that really I am shocked to see go in the top 10, and in most other drafts, they wouldn't. Before we get to the elephant in the room with Bronny James, I want to just talk about this class in general. I think there's some players with potential. I think Reed Shepherd is potential. Maybe the 2 best picks in the first round to me came in the middle of the first round, and they went to already good teams. Jared McCain, TikTok aside, is a baller. Maybe the best player on that Duke team, certainly better than Kyle Filipowski, and he doesn't have the distractions off the court that Kyle Filipowski currently has. That's a whole other wild situation. But McCain going to an already established 76ers team, he'll probably blend in there well. And then right after that, the Lakers' actual good pick in the draft was getting Dalton Knecht, SEC Player of the Year, first team consensus All-American from Tennessee, best player on that team, and complements that lineup very well. A team already with D'Angelo Russell, Austin Reeves, LeBron, AD. I think those are 2 really good picks because in a draft like this, you do not have a lot of glimmering talent, so you need to make a splash. Comparing it back to 2013 again, Giannis, Rudy Gobert, they both went mid-first round, and those are the 2 standout picks. Potentially Knecht and McCain can do the same thing, but in general, once again, this is not a good draft class.
No, it's not exactly a good draft class, but on the contrary, what surprised me the most and what's really frustrating about the NBA draft, and I kind of talked about it over text, right? Listen, I love the idea of expanding foreign players into your draft. But when you're drafting guys in the top 5 that have an average points per game of 5, and then you get what I'm saying, and don't exactly have the stat line to prove the NBA, to me, it's mind numbing. I think about Ron Holland, who went to the Pistons, right? At least he had G League experience when you think about it that could somewhat compare. I don't know.
Okay,
It's
but
just
it's not regular G League experience. It's with that G League Ignite team, which
right.
is essentially NBA's version of overtime elite. Like, here's the thing. I don't really agree with your argument here. Like, the NBA can't control the fact that some of their top prospects happen to be international players, and I think that's great to grow the game. And if their stats aren't great, well, maybe they still produce on the court. Wembanyama, his first couple of years in France before the breakout year, I mean, he wasn't incredible. Then the numbers really went up. But like we have seen some of these guys not have the best numbers and still contribute. So I can't really side with you there, but I do understand. Oh, go ahead.
What is the NBA? Is the NBA a league of scoring, or is it a league of good defense and good athleticism?
It's a league of scoring, but
Right. So here's my thing. If you don't have the stats to prove it, this is the reason why, to me, why guys like Zach Edey, I understand the speed, but it's such an impactful pick that the Grizzlies took, for example, right? The Grizzlies last season, look at it like this. They were the second, I believe, highest in turnovers. They scored the least points of any team average in the NBA. They were worse in field goal percentage, worse in 3-point percentage, and they turned over the ball like crazy. They couldn't get rebounds. They struggled at that as well, towards the bottom of the league defensively. Offensive rebounds were decent. But my point is this, is that Zach Edey, for example, has at least a resume of playing in a good college program, putting productive stats in a resume that could translate potentially to the NBA, which why, for example, I think he's a great pick for the Grizzlies because it's something they're missing that even with the lack of speed, they need somebody who can rebound the basketball and be efficient down low along with their dominant power forward. So to me, it really depends on the team. That's the thing. It depends on the team, the fit of what it needs in a weak draft class. But for me, what makes the NBA a little bit frustrating, Eddie, is yeah, people are looking at size and a little bit of things, right? And you say this guy makes a great player, he should go towards the top. And granted, yeah, we see it sometimes in the NFL, but unlike the NBA, the NFL has stats to work on because these guys will play college football. They don't just come from other countries and so on. There's going to be a lot of people judging players, a lot of fans of teams that have never seen these guys play to an extent if they didn't play college basketball. And that to me is the part that's a little bit concerning, just because of the fact that, listen, if these guys don't have resumes, I'm not saying they're not going to be good, but how do you truly judge talent? How do you truly judge somebody being to the level? Because I just don't know.
well, okay. I just want to say
Yep.
there's a point to be made here though that you can't really compare this to the NFL at all because college football at least very much resembles the NFL game. If you throw on a college basketball game and an NBA game in this era, it's night and day. You can argue that the guys that are playing professionally in France at a high speed, high scoring, flying back and forth up the court type of basketball might actually be better prep than what we're seeing in the NBA. So while, in the college ranks. So while you might make the argument that college guys, maybe they have better numbers, are they really as prepared for the current game that we're seeing right now? I don't know. I'm not saying they are because I mean, we've seen guys from overtime elite and G League Ignite that just don't really work out, but we've seen ones that do like Jalen Green. So I don't know, but I'm just saying there are other medians besides college basketball to gauge talent from. And just because they don't have the stats, college basketball guys have the stats, but they're not playing NBA basketball at the college ranks. They're playing essentially a completely different game.
Yeah, but I do feel in a league that is driven around superstars and players and getting that one guy to build you to championship caliber, what it feels like the NBA draft of late has been is drafting guys not exactly. I mean, yes, the number one overall pick is usually the best player, quote unquote, but they're not drafting the best player possible. They're drafting what may be the best fit with no actual evidence behind it of why that person should fit, which, yes, it's a risk, but there's a reason why a lot of these bottom teams in the draft or towards the bottom of the league every single season in the NBA. There's also another problem as well. So to me, I just, again, I don't know. Like, I get the point you're saying. And again, I think, for example, there's a lot of great players that have come from France. And listen, I think that the NBA doesn't exactly show the exact style that Olympic basketball, for example, presents that we talked about a while back. But to me, overall, if you're going to advertise the NBA is the best basketball league in the world as it is, right? You've got to have at least a reason to say why somebody that averages, let's say, 9 points a game is more worthy of drafting than a guy like, for example, Zach Edey, who averaged 25 points a game, dominated the college world for a top team in the country. Even the UConn players to me, how hard is it to win back-to-back national championships? And I get it, not every college player is pro, but on the contrary, you could say not every player in France is also pro worthy in the NBA level. So there are comparisons, is there not?
There is. And listen, I love your argument. I am a big time proponent of college basketball. I really want Zach Edey to succeed in the NBA to end the stigma that Big Ten centers don't fit in the NBA game. I'm just saying that it feels like these French players and other international players, despite the stats that you might see on the screen when Stephen A. Smith has no idea what he's talking about, trying to break them down, that they might be a little more acclimated to the NBA game than some people are letting you on about. So we'll see. We'll see. But I just think that these guys are a little more ready than you might think. But Rasache, Alex Sarr being 1-2 picks, I think regardless of what side of the argument you fall on, those two are certainly not number 1 and number 2 caliber picks. I mean, Victor Wembanyama was a number 1 pick, but not this year.
I say, can I also complain about something that frustrated me? Obviously, you saw my text yesterday about day 2 of the NBA draft. But this is the other problem with what the reason why I feel the NBA draft how it is. When everybody is asking the same question, it felt like, how do you, for example, the players that didn't have college experience, how do you feel you fit into your team, or how do you fit into the NBA with your style and background? It was constantly repetitive, the same question. To me, what makes the NFL draft, for example, so spectacular, and we'll get into that in a little bit when we talk about my top 5 drafts. However, what makes the NFL draft so spectacular is you have tape, right? You have a background. You have an idea of a person with a story. And I'm not saying no NBA players don't have stories. A lot of them do. But when there's a lot more players getting drafted that not a lot of people know very tiny about their stories, it should be on the league and should be on the people presenting to get these stories out and get it better. But when you're just asking the same questions over and over again, it's also harder to sell. So to me, that's also the big complaint I have of the NBA draft, is that to me, it's very hard to sell me on these players when it's just the same question. It looked like the presidential debate yesterday going around in circles with no answers, and then it led to golf discussion somehow.
Well, okay. Well, that's a whole other story. I want to see a driving contest between those two, by the way. And there's no way our 46th president has a 6 handicap. But listen, a lot of those problems that you just brought up, the NBA, I know it's their broadcast partners, but it's not really their fault. It's the fault of the people covering their draft. ESPN has second round draft coverage from their studio where they do first take. They've got Mark Tatum standing in there doing the draft from there. They got tables set up where Stephen A. Smith is usually standing. And in terms of the whole broadcast crew, there's not a single person there who ever played or coached in the game. The only person there who has any affiliation with any NBA organization ever is Bob Myers as an executive. You got Woj, who's a reporter, Stephen A. Smith, who is Stephen A. Smith, and Malika Andrews, who's a host. There are no former players or coaches breaking down these people anyway. So it's not just that maybe they don't have the resources to break them down. They don't have the people there who can actually take those resources and put them into effect. So that's one of the problems I have, and why I agree with you. The NFL draft is top of the crop because, it's actually got people that know about the sport and know about college football that are breaking down the players one by one. But we'll circle back to that when we go through Tim's tiers this week, which he has broken down. Now, 2 other notes to get into. I'm going to save Bronny for a second. I just want to get your quick reactions. I'll give mine first as a Nets fan. Mikal Bridges traded to the Knicks. Now, don't like really seeing him traded to a rival, but let's be honest, we all know that's where he wanted to be traded. And Sean Marks now has a tradition, besides Kyrie Irving, of granting the requests of what teams these people want to go to. James Harden wants to go to Philly, he sends him to Philly. KD wants to go to Phoenix, sends him to the Suns. But with Mikal Bridges, defensively, he's a stalwart, did not look great in Brooklyn's second half of last year. And I think it was really just that he didn't want to be there. He saw that all of his college teammates had paired up with a really good coach, was having a much better season, and went there. And honestly, I can't fault him, number one. And number two, Nets fans shouldn't be complaining, because the secondary trade that you did here was incredible, because you get the picks from the Knicks. And I mean, those aren't great. You get 4 of them, but let's be honest here, the Knicks are going to be a good team the next 4 or 5 years. So those picks are probably going to be outside the lottery. But then you do the flip with the 1, and you're able to get your pick back from the Rockets. All the picks you traded for James Harden are somehow back with the Nets, which means the Nets now own their first round pick in next year's draft, which will have Cooper Flagg and Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper and Liam McNeely, and a chance for a reset. VJ Edgecombe, it's a really, really good draft class next year. And now the Nets are in a good position to actually do something. So as a longtime Brooklyn Nets fan, I am just happy there is some sort of a direction, because ever since they traded James Harden for Ben Simmons, there has been no direction with this team whatsoever. They're still trying to compete. They're not attempting a rebuild, but they're not fully competing, and they're not fully rebuilding. Now we finally get a clear indication they want to rebuild. And kudos to Nick Claxton, who wants to stay along for the ride. Good for him, good center. Build around him and Cam Thomas. Use these next couple of years to build back up. Don't trade for any stars. That has not worked twice. Just build from within, and the Nets can be a competent basketball team. So I'm happy from that side. From the Knicks, you add Mikal Bridges. My thing is, I was talking with one of my friends who's a Knicks fan yesterday when we went golfing. He is a little hesitant, because now that they have Anunoby and Mikal Bridges, the wing guard spot is really, really crowded. And if they don't bring back Harkenstein, suddenly this is a really small team, and the defense and rebounding and post presence that Tom Thibodeau preaches, he doesn't really have the roster to do that. So interesting to see how they all blend together going forwards. But your thoughts on this trade from both the Knicks and the Nets side of things?
Yeah, I think it's huge for the Knicks because, again, they needed answers and they needed that other guy. I don't know, though, if you think about it 2 years ago. I mean, the first round picks they traded for Bridges shows just how crazy the NBA is and how meaningless the draft is in some ways for certain teams, because it's either you're a buyer or you're purely growing on development and the focus of the future. And for the Knicks, for a very long time, they were in that phase where it felt developing. And now, finally, after first time since about 11 years ago, they are finally buyers again, which is something that Knicks fans should be excited about. But, Eddie, I guess I'll ask you first, because obviously you are the resident Nets fan in the room. But my thing is this, is that how do you feel about the connection with Bridges? Because he was only here for 2 years. Do you feel perhaps a little bit betrayed that he opted to go to the other side? Because I felt there was a lot of very enraged Nets fans when they saw this, because they felt if there was one team you couldn't trade to potentially give them the championship piece, it would be the Knicks. And he wanted to go play with his college teammates.
Well, here's the thing. Number one, I don't think Mikal Bridges is the championship piece on that team. I really don't. I really don't. And number two, as a Nets fan, I could really care less about the Knicks one way or the other. You got what you needed. Your organization put yourselves in this spot where you're kind of in a catch-22 where you have to do something. Like, I'm not that upset. I'm really not. I don't think this makes the Knicks a better team than Boston. I really don't think so. And if the Sixers can straighten things out and stay healthy, I still think that's a better team than the Knicks going forwards as well. With Embiid playing with whatever it was, Bell's palsy or something, he still almost beat the Knicks as a 7 seed that had to go through the play-in. Like, I really wouldn't worry that much if I'm a Nets fan. Yeah, it's annoying. Yeah, it's like, oh, it's the first time in 40 years. We never see two teams, that are rivals trade with one another. But it's not that big of a deal to me. It really isn't. For the Nets, the number one goal should have been to rebuild. That should have been the goal a year and a half ago when you decided to pivot away from Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. And no matter what route you're going down to get there, do it. And if that involves having to trade Mikal Bridges to the Knicks, so be it. So I'm glad they finally have direction. I'm happier about that. I have more of an emotion, a positive emotion towards that than a negative emotion towards Mikal Bridges leaving for a rival. So, and honestly, betrayal, let's stop with that. He was here for a year and a half. He clearly didn't enjoy himself here. It's not like he chose to come here and then changed his mind like Mr. Harden. Mikal Bridges was traded here away from a championship, near championship winning team to a Nets team where he's suddenly asked to be the number one guy, which I don't think he really wants to be. And now he gets to blend in with the Knicks. So he wasn't really cemented with any sort of legacy with the Nets. I think Nets fans that are so enraged about this are overreacting just a little bit. And again, this Knicks team still hasn't gotten past the second round. So be it.
And see, that's where I agree with you. I feel that the Nets a while ago should have tore themselves apart, and this offseason in particular. Like a lot of teams, you find the sense of direction. Like, for example, we talked about the Lakers, right? With age and stuff, you want them to tear apart. The Nets, not exactly in that situation, but to me, getting assets for Bridges is the number one thing because now you can start building towards that core and towards that future. And really for the Nets moving forward, I think it's not just the fact that you finally start to see a direction and an identity, but you really also get to see a focus and a new spotlight on players. And that's what I think is the most important part because without really having an idea of what your core can be outside of one or two players can be really, really crucial because at the end of the day, just for example, like again, we talk about the Knicks, right? The Knicks for a while took them a while struggling in a draft and so on to finally start finding a couple of productive guys. Let's be honest, the draft is no guarantee, but the Nets maybe potentially down the road getting a lottery pick or finding ways, with the Knicks picks to get some depth players, assuming they're going to be above 500 competitive over that stretch. To me, that means a lot more right now building a core group before getting another superstar again. And this is the last point I'll make about the Nets, Eddie, because you've been through the phase twice already, right? You got Durant, you got Kyrie, you tried trading for Harden, that didn't work. You tried finding another way for winning. Sometimes you have to understand that change is good. And again, I always bring up the Yankees example, but it's the truth. Change has to happen for you to get to the next step of being successful. And the Nets finally have accepted the fact that, listen, another superstar along with Bridges isn't going to be that answer. You don't really have the trade pieces either at the time to do it. So the fact that you're finally giving yourself pieces, you're finally able to take the next step in direction is the true important part. And I'm eager to see what the Nets look. I really don't think, to be honest with you, I know they're going to be bad. They're going to probably have a lottery pick, but I don't think they're going to be as bad as what people think next season.
Yeah.
I think they can win at least 20 games,
Mm-hmm.
but I just don't. I don't see the Nets being the worst team in the NBA. And to be honest with you, they don't have to be the worst in the NBA to get the number one pick either. I think we've proven that now over the last few years. So I think the Nets will be fine. But I will say this last thing too: if you're a Nets fan and you go to the Barclays Center and you're mad that your ticket prices are going up for season tickets or whatever, understand now that yes, I know it's hard to go and see a losing team potentially for the next 2-3 years, but it's the fan base that's going to be there through rock bottom that'll make it better when they go through the top. And again, I know Durant and Kyrie didn't work out, but you have to trust and have faith and be supportive that this future could be bright for the Nets down the road.
And one more point I'll make before we pivot to Bronny. Sean Marks gets a lot of criticism. I don't think there is any GM in the history of the NBA who has had to deal with the idiocracies, the ridiculousness, the high maintenance players of high level talent that Sean Marks has repeatedly had to deal with the last few years to manage things. And I think overall he's done a pretty good job. The one more albatross is still Ben Simmons is on the roster. Something needs to be done about that. I think
MVP
you
here,
gotta
I'm
just release
calling.
him. Just release him. It's just release him. There's no reason for him to be on the roster. He's a professional fan right now. Get him off the team. Just release him. Nobody's gonna want him. Just buy out his contract, eat it, move on. Again, if you're gonna
For
pivot to a
Whammy,
full,
be more productive than him.
just pivot to a full rebuild. And a full rebuild means Ben Simmons gone. So let's just address that. Let's address something else now. The Los Angeles Lakers are going to be the definition of a clown show next year because Bronny gets drafted. Rich Paul is calling teams threatening, oh, don't pick Bronny James. He's going to leave for Australia if you try to pick him. Who cares? Who wants him? Who wants him? The only person who wants him is his dad. LeBron James now basically controls everything with the Lakers. Not only does he have a coach that he handpicked, he controls management as well, and now he's controlling the draft. Bronny James, and I want to preface it once again with this. I think he can still be a talent at some point in the NBA. I think he could pan out to be a good player. And I feel bad that everything happened with the cardiac arrest and he didn't get to have a full college season so we could see his full potential. That being said, with not having a full college season, he should have gone back for another year because we have seen high-level prospects that barely played in college and what's happened to them in the NBA. Two prime examples, James Wiseman, Amani Bates. Both of them were hyped up as these big all-world talents in college, barely played for one reason or another, get to the NBA, and they are nowhere near what their potential was. They're closer to their floor. They even go beyond their floor. They're in the basement. So Bronny James, I worry, could be the same thing. You know, Tim, you're talking about stats with these international guys. Bronny averaged 4.5 points a game. Yes.
4.2.
Yes.
It's and again, I'll say it like this: to get drafted based off your name again, it's Bronny. We've heard about it for years about LeBron's goals to play with his son in the NBA. That's his last goal. But to me, the honest to God comparison, and we know we talk about NASCAR on the show, but I really do mean it. I don't think we have seen a father command this much power in regards to making something happen since Dale Earnhardt creating DEI with Dale Jr. to give him a spot to race and develop the next generation and be there. And of course, obviously, unfortunately for Dale Earnhardt, tragic accident, things don't work out the full way. Hopefully, praying nothing ever happens to LeBron. But the point is that, you know, to see Bronny's development is going to be a story of its own. And to be honest with you, I think this is now the most compelling family story I think the NBA has had since the balls. Just really think about it.
It's the most compelling family story to me in the history of sports. I mean, there is no precedent in any major sports of a player that is at the talent level that LeBron James is to have their kid on the same team. I mean, how does this dynamic even work? How much is Bronny James going to be forced to be played by LeBron telling JJ Redick, get this kid in the rotation when he might not deserve it? Would he dare start him in the G League? Or would Bronny be on the Lakers bench for game one when he probably doesn't deserve it, much less be in the rotation game one? I mean, if you have Spencer Dinwiddie on your roster, Spencer Dinwiddie should be playing the backup point, not Bronny James. Give Bronny time to develop. I think it would have been a win-win situation for everybody if someone had defied Rich Paul, drafted Bronny James, and sent him to Australia for a year. That way he could develop, and when he came here, he could actually be a complementary piece to a team. He's not ready for it, and I really wonder about the psyche of Bronny too. I can't imagine that he is 100% happy with the situation too. He wants to carve out his own path. His whole life he's lived as LeBron James's son. He finally gets a chance to be in the NBA. Now, I know a lot of that is thanks to his father, but he's going to have his father just there. I can't imagine that dynamic, being in the locker room, trying to carve out your own path, and dad sitting there 2 feet away and managing the whole situation. I can't imagine how Bronny is going to be able to handle that. It's going to be tough. I wish him luck. I wish the Lakers a lot of luck, but this is going to be a disaster. It is. JJ Redick has never coached before and is going to have to be forced to deal with the craziest situation that any NBA coach has ever had to deal with.
Well, I put it like this. Sometimes you need a lunatic to take over a lunatic's position. And JJ Redick
That's
is
a
living of the situation, unfortunately. So I just I don't know what else to say other than LeBron has had career goals. He's talked about this for a while, getting to play with his son. I'm not saying LeBron could retire after this season, but it's the idea of this is the end of it. This is the ending chapter of the long story of LeBron James in what he's done for basketball. And listen, I do agree with Stephen A. Smith in one point for one thing that he'd said yesterday during the draft. And LeBron, to an extent, kind of does earn the right to have this power in the situation for one reason. He's been to 10 NBA finals. He's captivated basketball. He's had a successful career. And I'm not saying that if he was on any team, it would make any difference, but for the Lakers being a big city of stars, of people are there to watch LeBron. People are there to watch Anthony Davis. People are going to be there realistically, whether he's good or not, to watch Bronny James. And while I agree, does Bronny want to create his own path? Absolutely. Does he want to be his own person? Yes. But without that college experience, without, any Australian experience or any other foreign basketball experience, which he could benefit from, he has the best in the world to advise him and teach him how to be dominant and be potentially even better than his father. And I'm not saying that, again, that's hard shoes to fill. I'm not saying he's going to be. And more often than not, most kids end up not being anywhere near close to the talent their parents are. That's the realism of it. But at the end of the day, I think I'm not saying it's different, but it's LeBron James. And while it's chaotic for the Lakers and it is absolutely crazy, I would not be surprised knowing how the NBA is that we get to the end of the year. The Lakers are a playoff team. They're playing decent basketball, and Bronny James is a consistent producer for their team. While that's unlikely, sounds crazy, sounds unrealistic, but that's the situation JJ Redick's in. That's the situation the Lakers are in. So I guess expect the unexpected on a positive note, or I shouldn't say on a positive note, and a realistic note. You and I looking at each other. The Lakers next season are at best a 30-win team. But what do I know? I don't know anything because it's the NBA, and anything can change when it happens tomorrow.
I'll say this: if Bronny throws a lob to LeBron in a game, every social media app is going to crash. It's going to be the most viewed video of all time. It will. So
we'll see how he plays in the summer league. At least that'll give us our first taste, and then we'll see what happens going there and moving forward. Of course, LeBron's not going to play in the summer league, but you get what I'm saying. That you're going to see a sense of development and see where he's at. And again, I couldn't imagine playing. Forget about I played baseball, but I couldn't imagine playing a sport, especially a little bit of time after having cardiac arrest in situations. And God bless Ronnie Soul for that, because that takes a lot of courage and so on. But to now go to the NBA, not even a year later, through all this, and yes, again, he has a role model, he has a leader right in front of him, that being his father. But there's going to be an enormous amount of pressure, and we're going to see, can he step to the occasion? And I would like to say he can. I think that he does have talent, and again, college stats don't exactly show because it was very, very small for him in his situation. But the expectation is he's his father. If anybody has that, you're delusional, because he's got to be his own kid. He plays a different position. He's a different size. I don't want to say completely looks different, but you get what I'm saying. Where LeBron was out of high school and where he is are two different people, So for Bronny, it's being his own person. And again, I'm excited to see what it is for the Lakers moving forward. It is definitely the most captivating story in all basketball, which I guess it does need, but I don't think the Lakers are going to be good. And I don't think this pick is going to be beneficial fully for Bronny James, at least this season.
yeah, I don't think so either. And I really wonder what all the other players on the Lakers roster are thinking. But this gets us into Tim's Tiers, our new segment where Tim goes through a top 5 of something. And he had his own idea here. And this is an interesting one. So Tim has sounded off repeatedly on this episode about the NBA draft. So I want to see where it ranks. What are your top 5 drafts? Period. Well, question mark. Top 5 drafts. Go.
Right. Well, first, I'm going to give an honorable mention to the NHL draft. To be honest with you, I've never watched the NHL draft, even when the Rangers drafted Capo Caco. So I have no idea what it looks like, and I can really care less. But number 5, it's the NBA draft. We talked about it. The coverage is awful. I can't stand it. It's the same questions over and over again. The NBA draft is so boring to watch. And this year's draft made it 1,000 times worse, where the only thing you had to look forward to on day 2 was Bronny James. Number 4, it's really got to be the MLB draft. Think about it. For the MLB draft, I mean, they've changed over time. When it used to be, 60, whatever it was, rounds, now down to 20. The pandemic has changed it. Yes, it's also kind of in an in-office studio, but it still tells the stories. It gets the job done, and it produces some of the best stories in all of baseball in the future. Number 3, it's got to be the draft. That's right, folks. There's nothing more captivating that gets the eyes opening and people watching than the draft to the war. You want to watch your birthday go on the clock and see where you last? I'm not saying it's the best thing in the world. Of course, it's devastating, but it gets the eyes going. It gets people watching, and people are very interested to see if they'll be going to war or not. Number 2, it's the NFL draft, of course. And why you're surprised it's number 2? Because I says it's the best. I mean, come on now. Nobody tells a better story. Mel Kiper is the best there is out there. Let's be honest. And number 1. Come on now. It's got to be the Sports Speak Gimmick Fantasy Draft. There is no better draft out there than our gimmick draft that'll, by the way, be coming back either the last week of August or first week of September. Of course, after cut day for year number 3. We've got 2 more teams. I think, 14 now? And I cannot wait. We're getting to the nitty-gritty.
I cannot believe you put the military draft above 3 of the 4 professional sports leagues. I mean, my goodness. If I was ranking these, I don't think I'd put the draft in there. But baseball,
the whole world's watching the military draft if it happens again.
No, they're not. Just America is. Just not wanting to get picked.
Well, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. The entirety of America, that's still more eyes than what would be on the NBA or MLB draft.
Yeah, but I'd like to think that the Sports Speak Fantasy Draft has that many eyes, but I don't know. But MLB, my problem with the MLB draft, just quickly, is like, and this is no fault of, the way they cover it, how many rounds it is. I think it's gotten better. But like, as a fan, like, I watch the draft and I'm like, all right, who cares? I'll see these guys in 2 years. The exception of a couple speedsters that fly through after playing in college, like Jackson Holliday or Paul Skeens. You're not going to hear from these guys again in 2 years. Like, the Mets will pick some people. I won't think about them for 2 years. Like, every other draft, you're thinking about those players immediately. After, like, baseball, I don't know. To me, it's hard for me to watch. I never watch MLB draft, but I'd put that a little bit lower. But that's Tim's tiers. We'll keep those going every single week. That was a fun one. Let's transition to the last topic. Citi Field behind me is now the house of horrors for Yankee fans because the Mets dominated. Besides Adam Ottavino and Reed Garrett nearly blowing game 1, the Mets were dominant. Put up 21 runs in 2 games. And while I have been very critical of this Mets team, especially early in the year, vibes are high right now. Maybe it's Grimace, maybe it's Jorge Lopez, maybe it's Francisco Alvarez. Something has caused a spark in this Mets team where they have had their best June that I have ever seen from this team. And now they face the Astros this weekend. We'll see if they can keep it going. But the entire lineup looks good. The pitching looks good. The bullpen has been a little shaky, but it's been mostly good. I'm going to touch on that at the end. But Tim, your Yankees, they lose both games of the Subway Series. I don't care about people saying to the Mets fans, enjoy your World Series. Guess what? The Mets have been to a World Series more recently than the Yankees. But listen, if you're a Yankee fan, I understand why you might be frustrated right now. I think your anger sometimes is a little unwarranted, but right now it might be justified because things are suddenly going badly, and they're not just going bad, they're going awful. Garrett Cole does not look like himself. Luis Gil's magical run is over, and Carlos Rodon is simply not good. Marcus Stroman is overrated, and Nestor's overrated, and that's your rotation. So the Yankees and injuries have started to happen. Anthony Rizzo, Giancarlo Stanton, injury scares with both Judge and Soto. It's starting to suddenly look like one of those typical Yankee years.
Yeah, and this is the first time all season, and it happened right after Stanton got hurt, where the Yankees finally start to go on that slump and play awful baseball. But the difference is it has nothing to do with the bats not getting going. It has all to do with the starting rotation being an absolute disaster, not just one pitcher here and there. It's all of them at once. And it stinks because it comes right back or comes right when Garrett Cole gets back. And first off, Eddie, I agree with you. Garrett Cole doesn't look 100%. He doesn't look there. And that worries me because I was talking about this with Miniker the other day. You know, while Luis Gil has been great, he was due for a couple bad starts. He struggles. You know how I feel about Carlos Rodon. I don't know how I feel about the Yankees going to the postseason and Garrett Cole pitching meaningful innings if he isn't 100%. And I can't be ever so thankful for what he's done the last few years, last year winning a Cy Young. But for him to be a gamer and to come out and not be 100% to me makes no sense because where we need him is September and October. And right now, to be honest with you, it's very comparable. You know what he looks like? He looks like what Luis Severino was when hurt. And that's the problem. He's leaving everything down the middle. He's allowing long balls. And to me, velocity doesn't mean everything. I think CC Sabathia made that very prevalent when he lost himself for a little bit, but that was the difference because the Yankees made him lose weight and he made him get his weight back and so on, and he wasn't fully healthy. Garrett Cole's starting to get the back half of his career, and this pitching staff, it started off great. It's falling very quickly. And while the Yankees may have some answers, we may see Al Frost back soon, for example, who we traded for a few years ago to join the bullpen as well as a couple other people. That's great and grand. But for the Yankees rotation, I said it at the start of the year, it never was the full answer. They need options. The problem is with a very tight deadline, I don't know. But these last 6, 7 games, even in Yankees wins, the pitching rotation has been despicable. It's disgusting. And by far, I mean, an absolute embarrassment, not just against the Mets, but what we saw against the Blue Jays yesterday. I mean, it's like they're serving up batting practice right now. And this is the last point I'll make. You said it with Eddie, or you said it with Raheel and Zoe, I believe. Oh gosh, I want to say right. Maybe it was in May. I could be wrong. It was an early point in the season though when we talked about the Yankees' hot start, and we said we'll see what happens when they get hurt. Guess what? They're hurt. They stink, and they're back to normal again. And that stinks to see because the Yankees had an AL East lead. Now they're technically tied for the division lead. If they don't solve this soon and get back on track, they're going to be in trouble. And yeah, they'll still be a playoff team, but they're going to be in trouble. They're not going to win the AL East. And that's the part that stinks because you have a very good, consistent Baltimore Orioles team, as well as a Guardians team that is right up there being competitive in the AL Central. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, but Yankees still have a very good record. Be interesting to see how it goes the next couple of months. But the Mets, and this is where I want to finish this episode, because they got news that Drew Smith is likely going to need Tommy John surgery for a second time, which is a big blow to the bullpen. Smith is not an elite guy by any sort, but he's an innings eater and has been the best middle inning reliever for the Mets for the last 5 years. And this circles back to a conversation we had 2 years ago about when all the whole spider tack thing happened and they started doing the crazy checks and the whole thing with Max Scherzer and the umpires rubbing his hair and everything. All these pitchers were encouraged, and you can go back and see, I said the same thing 3 years ago. They're all encouraged to do the spider tack thing because pitching has gotten so ridiculously uber competitive right now, and pitching is evolving at a rate that hitting is not. And pitchers are being encouraged to try to find as much velocity and as much spin as they possibly can. And that's led to people using spider tack, and then that got cracked down, so then everything's about sweat and rosin. But if you go back to the older days of Major League Baseball, Yes, pitchers tried to do different things. Yes, he had the old era of the spitballs and all that. But pitchers were not as obsessed with spin rate and velocity as they are now. It was just strictly about getting outs. And that's why pitchers were able to last longer in games and not get hurt as often. And we got to see them out on the mound more. And we actually had pitching stars. Major League Baseball no longer has pitching stars. 4 of the top 5 guys in ERA right now are either converted relievers or people who weren't even in the majors last year. So things have changed at a dramatic rate. It's ridiculous right now the way things have gone on in this sport. And you try to crack down on the spider tack, and now the umpires make it all about themselves. And I think back to a couple years ago when this all started, and I think back to a Yankees game, Tim, with Clark Schmidt last year and with Domingo Germán. And then when they're telling Clark Schmidt, oh, yeah, you can go wash your hands. Why is there a double standard with Edwin Diaz when it's very clearly sweat and rosin? If you have these rules to legislate, why don't you just let them wash their hands? Because if you don't, then you eject them now. You cost the Mets their closer for a week and a half. And now, even worse, Drew Smith gets forced to rush and get ready to come into a game to try to save it. And I'd say it's not a coincidence that a week later, he's got a blown out arm. So this is just a product of umpirial mismanagement within Major League Baseball, paired with the fact that pitchers now have been taught that they have to put anything possible on their hands to throw 102 miles an hour, have these ridiculous spin rates, have these names of pitches that I've never heard of before. And it all boils down to the fact that pitching has become almost a farce in Major League Baseball. You can't have a successful pitcher anymore because if you're successful, you kill your arm and you get hurt. And that's one of the major reasons now that Major League Baseball is not as popular of a sport as it used to be.
And there's another thing you're forgetting too. What about the dominance we're seeing of position players pitching in Major League Baseball this year in blowout games? I'm not saying that there's a trend, but overall, I think it's very interesting to think about the fact that, you know, I don't know, the whole spider tag thing, it's an issue, but to be honest with you, again, our bodies weren't meant to throw baseballs. Coming from somebody that's played baseball, it's not natural. Throwing motions aren't natural. This idea of trying to emphasize spin rate, trying to emphasize velocity, it makes sense, yes, because it's harder to hit, but also it's a big reason why we're seeing a lot more long balls go up because of the spin rates and how these balls come off bats. This is why we're seeing a lot more line drive come back even harder at pitchers, as well as other things. I don't know. It's very interesting because you think about the 80s and stuff, right? And I think about even when I was a kid, right? What made guys, and I always talk about Steven Strasburg a lot, what made guys like Steven Strasburg so rare is because he threw that velocity, but he had a lot of stuff that really mixed it up. Guys like Ubaldo Jimenez, for example, when he won Cy Young, yeah, it's hard to see 100, but he had a lot of stuff to mix up. Guys like Yu Darvish, yeah, didn't exactly throw 100, but he threw the mid 90s, and then he had something that can mix up with flow speeds. For me, the way Major League Baseball gets rid of these injuries makes change and takes away out of the umpire's hands, to be honest with you, Eddie, is you start slowing down these pitchers again. And the other thing, too, is we talk about guys just go out there throwing, right? We're talking about pitch counts, longevities, complete games. They don't really happen anymore. Baseball speeding up was a very good thing with the pitch clock. It's not a good thing when you throw 102, 103, whatever it is, from a starting pitchers to maybe go 80 pitches into a game. Baseball needs to go backwards for a moment with pitchers and make change. Because right now, what we're seeing too, it's funny you mention it, a lot of baseball's most dominant pitchers right now, let's be honest with you, in terms of what we're seeing this season, do they really throw that hard? No, they have good pitch difference. They have good velocity mix-ups. And that, to me, is what baseball needs. And if I'm the Mets, I'm going to be pissed because let's be honest with you, too. Not only do you get an injury off of this, right? Talk about the double standard of at least trying to go, allowing Edwin Diaz to wash his hands. Let's still not act like what happened with Max Scherzer wasn't a lot of BS a few years ago either. So to this point, with it being, I don't know, this year, it started with Shohei Ohtani being the main focus of everything with the whole gambling situation. 2024, though, has really been highlighted by poor umpiring. Angel Hernandez thankfully finally retiring.
Forced
And
into
poor,
retirement, which is beautiful.
yeah, right after I asked people, are you worse than Angel Hernandez on, our good old trivia show? So needless to say, um, I just think that baseball right now is kicking itself in the foot. And I'm a huge, huge advocate for the automated strike zone. I'm excited to see it come to AAA, but it needs to come to Major League Baseball very soon. And I think that, again, for pitching to be productive in Major League Baseball, to get back to a dominant era, you don't need to be a guy that throws 100. You need to have stuff that can mix up, rotate. And you'll find exit velocity will go a lot more down by guys that throw a lot more slower. So again, that's the reason why I brought a position player pitching, because it's very, very ironic that we're seeing position players that are throwing lob balls and then mixing it up and throwing 95, for example, out of nowhere, being productive, not because players don't exactly care, they're just out there swinging, because it's something these players aren't used to anymore. So why not mix it up? Maybe Zach Greinke should come back and play baseball, because he seemed to be the only one that wanted to mix things up.
Yep, exactly. And again, pitchers are so rooted into now having to throw high velocity. Spencer Strider, high velocity, great pitcher. What happens? He's on the shelf. He's out 2 years. I love Paul Skeens, but even Livy Dunn isn't going to protect that arm. After a while, that's going to get worn down. Wouldn't be shocked if he needs TJ by next year.
Why Trevor Bauer in Major League Baseball right now? So that's the other thing I don't get. Everything with the lawsuits and everything that's happened, Trevor Bauer is dominating down in Mexico. He's putting up surreal numbers that, yes, I understand the Mexican league isn't the best. I get that when he played last year in Japan wasn't exactly the best, but he put up productive numbers with some of the top pitchers that moved to Major League Baseball this year, that also being Yamamoto. So to me, I feel like the Trevor Bauer should be on the team. Preferably, I wish he was on the Yankees. I said that from the start of the season. And I understand the distraction aside, but he is the direct example of somebody who doesn't throw 100, found ways to exploit, of course, with spider tack or whatever, his own stuff to create spin rates. But he's the perfect example of a pitcher that is willing to mix things up, have his own philosophy to change things. And I get, yes, not everybody's easy to work with, but you need more pitchers like that are trying to break barriers to be successful and help your team win championships. Because ultimately, we talk about consistency being productivity of winning championships, but having a pitcher that also stands out from the rest and making something matter when they're out there throwing innings, that also stands a very big way, which is why guys like, for example, like Jacob deGrom, who is another example of an injury pitcher, prone pitcher, for example, who threw 100 whenever, was very successful because he was willing to try to change and adapt through his Mets tenure. So I'll succeed with that. I think that baseball needs to change, and I think that, again, Trevor Bauer should be somewhere on a Major League Baseball team. It's ridiculous.
Well, I can agree with you in some parts on the Bauer stuff, but Robinson Cano is hitting 450 in that league at like 43 years old. So I don't know how seriously to take Mexican league stats. You were just 45 minutes ago, you were bashing international league stats with these French basketball players, but we'll leave it at that. I'll just say this. Major League Baseball, something needs to change here because every good pitcher gets hurt now. It's impossible to root for a pitcher because if they're really good, they're bound to get hurt. It's a clear correlation, and it's a big reason why the national pastime is now a niche sport. But
hey, if you're a pitcher and you get hurt and you could swing a bat, you'll make $700 million. So
you can, and potentially more in the fields of DraftKings and FanDuel and all that through your interpreter. But that's it for this episode. Loaded episode of Sports Speak Live, episode 180. Again, powered by SeatGeek. Next week, we'll be back for some more. And the week after that, we're going to have an in-person show while we're in Pocono for Motorsports Today. So should be looking forward to that one. But until next time, I'm Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Signing off here of Sports Speak Live. Lakers, feel bad for you. It's going to be a disaster. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.